Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Critical Review. I'm Lovi.
And I'm Arlian.
Today we're going to talk about Phantom Breaker
Booty.
Battlegrounds. A great example of a brainless beat-em-up with a paper-thin plot, Phantom Breaker is a fun way to pass time with something light. If all you want is to take down hordes of enemies as chibi anime girls without bothering about the drama that usually comes along with such characters, you'll have fun with this, but don't go into it looking for any deep gameplay or plot, or you'll be severely disappointed.
Maguka, why?
Really, the deepest mechanical aspect to the game is that whilst it's a 2D brawler, it's one that has additional lanes that you can switch back and forth between for defensive and offensive purposes. Honestly, the Onimusha fighting game for PS2 sorta comes to mind with the way it's handled. So, with all that said, let's move on to talking about the game's mechanics.
Battlegrounds has 4 gameplay modes to choose from: Story Mode, Arcade Mode, Co-op Mode, and Battleground Mode. The first 3 game modes are fairly similar. Story Mode allows for the player to fully experience the game's story, while Arcade is just a normal game with the cutscenes and dialogue taken out, and Co-op is essentially the same as Arcade Mode but with the ability to play with up to 4 players either online or locally. You can experience PvP with the Battleground mode, which also allows for up to 4 players. This mode is extremely unbalanced though, and even the slightest level difference between characters hugely impacts one's probability of winning, so it is not recommended to test your skill here unless everyone uses a level 0 character.
Or, characters of a similar level.
Also, the game heavily favors controller use, so bear that in mind, as whilst it is possible to get through the game using keyboard controls, slowly, due to the multiple inputs needed for many abilities, a controller reigns king. That, and makes things like double tapping to dash or dodge way easier. That said, the game's at least fairly responsive in that regard, with the main downside being that a lot of the more nuanced aspects of the controls you're going to have to figure it through trial and error or looking up a guide somewhere. Anyways, back to you, Lovey.
The main game features only 8 short levels, with an easy and normal difficulty to start out with, and more to be unlocked as you conquer the game on each. When you first start out the game, the player has the ability to choose from 4 playable characters, each with their own unique unlockable special abilities, and there's also the possibility to unlock 4 of the bosses you fight against as playable characters if you complete the higher difficulty levels, and some recolors of earlier characters to boot. 2 additional characters may also be purchased through DLC. It should be noted that while playing story mode, only the starting 4 characters have a storyline. All characters have multiple color schemes to choose from, but if you would prefer your cute anime girls to be sporting animal ears, there's a DLC for that. The game itself is quite simple. All you need to do is take down all the enemies in an area to proceed. There aren't any special boss mechanics that can't be bested by brute force, and no enemy requires any real strategy, at least in early difficulties. Even though there are 4 attack buttons for a weak attack, medium attack, heavy attack, and special attack, the game can easily be beaten by button mashing, negating the skills that can be unlocked.
Though, inversely, learning to use those skills can make the game a fair bit easier than relying on the overwhelming brute force strategy. And higher difficulty modes will begin to have the bosses using their special attacks against you, which tends to make things somewhat more painful. That, and learning to at least dodge, will help you avoid getting circle beaten to pulp, with additional supplemental abilities coming in the form of a panic button knockback to give yourself some breathing room, an overcharge that makes you faster and stronger, and a really tedious lightning attack that you and the bosses will likely end up spamming back and forth at each other. I really wish that ability wasn't in the game. Anyways.
To level in Battlegrounds, the player needs to collect the red gems that the enemies drop on death to increase your experience. Experience is not shared between characters or players when playing co-op, so there is a need to be aggressive if being out-leveled bothers you. The base game's level cap is 50, but it can be increased to 99 if you purchase either of the bonus character DLCs, Kurisu Makise or Frau Kojiro. Within the skill tree, which cannot be accessed between levels when you're in co-op, you have to exit your current game in order to spend skill points. The player has the option to tailor the skills and stats of each character individually. The skill points are used for both skills and stats, so it is up to the player to decide whether they would rather increase the character's attack, defense, or speed, whether they would prefer to unlock skills, or a combination, depending on what suits their playstyle.
Also, on the notes of levels and skill points, there's actually a fairly glaring fault in Phantom Breakers, and it's a potentially major turnoff for newcomers who are undoubtedly the ones who would hit this proverbial brick wall. Essentially, when the player normally boots up an arcade or storyline campaign, they are level, air quotes, infinite for the tutorial stage, i.e. you get to run around with max stats and all their skills, which lets them get a nice feel for the character they've selected and have fun. That said, if they make the error of wanting to play the game in co-op and haven't already been leveling both characters, they'll end up with the rude discovery that the level infinite part of the tutorial is a story event and therefore disabled. And the first boss is definitely no slouch. So instead of the royal beatdown you'd normally pull against the first boss, you'll be instead introduced to a grueling grudge match, which will likely have you seeing the game over screen multiple times until you finally gained enough experience to up your attack power so you can put a dent in their defense. Not really the best of co-op experiences there, and especially not in tandem with the simple fact that getting experience can be a trial with the way that it just disappears over time. That's right, not only is experience not shared, picking up experience is also on a timer, which can make collecting it during a fight really difficult. So, with all that said about the mechanics,
Well, there really isn't much to say about this game's story. It's quite lackluster, and in my opinion, not worth the time that it takes to do a story mode playthrough when you could be having way more fun in co-op mode. The only way to describe the silliness that calls itself a plot is ridiculous anime nonsense.
and I pretty much have to agree. I mean, it's a slightly neat touch that different characters get different dialogue, but the game doesn't bother giving any of the unlockable characters any form of story arc. And what's even more offensive is even the DLC characters, who you gotta drop cash to unlock, aren't given their own story arcs. The most I can see is Kurisu gets unique battle music. Also, whilst there could have been interesting character interactions and having at least some of the dialogue change in co-op mode, I suppose they determined it would be a hassle with such a large roster and just decided to skip all the dialogue. But not the animations, so you get some pretty quirky games of charades going on at times as they go through all the motions for a cutscene. And with this said, we can move on to the game's audio.
Overall, Battlegrounds music is cheery and chill. It's not overly dramatic, and it's calming and pleasant to listen to. The chiptune goes well with the pixelated art style of the game and adds to the anime atmosphere. It doesn't really stand out, but it's not overly generic either.
And the DLC, at least in the Kurisu pack, adds a Steins Gate theme for those craving a familiar theme done chiptune style. Honestly, I found the music and the voicing in the game one of its stronger aspects. One of them, since it also flourishes in the graphics department. Speaking of...
The visuals diverge a bit from the norm of the Phantom Breaker franchise, as all the characters are depicted as chibis and all art is pixelated. This is a bit weird combined with the sometimes 3D backgrounds, but it isn't all that noticeable unless you really pay attention. The general style is cute and cheerful, but even though everyone is a chibi, there are still ample bosoms to be seen.
Yeah, seriously, pretty much every playable character save one is female, and you'd have to squint looking for a set of pixels that isn't more racked than a family set of barbecue ribs. Which is actually even more noticeable when you get to the ending sequence, which totally has a super non-subtle boob cam moment. Alright, but art-wise, yeah, the game really is nice to look at, showing a bright, vivid world, and its character designs are pretty creative. On the protagonist side, we have the ninja schoolgirl, shrine maiden, bullet hammer wielding maid, and a Lolita-styled swordsman, before we even get to the optional characters and the massive alternate color schemes each one has. On the antagonist side, there happens to be an army of enemies which look like some sort of weird mashup between cyborgs, aliens, demonic possessions, and some weirdly cute mages that show up late game and look like they just might belong in a bullet hell game Toho style. Anyways, so that and a smattering of boss characters that fit right in with the protagonist designs, and you have just Phantom Breaker in a nutshell. So, all this said,
Battlegrounds isn't something I would recommend to anyone looking for any depth. It is good mindless fun, however, if you choose to play it with friends, as it's good to sometimes wind down with cute anime girls.
in my case, essentially whilst I wouldn't say that it's a bad game, I wouldn't say I was wowed by it. It's more or less a party game at its core if you're in the mood for a brawler and want to do something with a friend. Honestly, as a game, it's essentially somewhat entry-level, which might make it appetizing to play with a friend who's not as good at frustration-heavy games, or who just wants something light and anime-flavored. Unless you go into it looking to a hardcore achievement hunt and obsessively max things out, you might get a couple of afternoons out of the game at best.